Okay. One Piece chapter 1067. Color me intrigued because it looks like we're going to find out more of why the fishmen were actually being discriminated against. Because that was something that always stood out to me the more that we learned. It really became clear that Oda was doing something else in terms of long-term storytelling with the fishmen. Like, you got introduced to them in Arlong Park, and then you learn more when you get to Saobody, then you learn more when you get to Fishman Island, but it never set right that that was all the information that we got. And this does not seem like it's a coincidence that 200 years ago, you had this giant machine creature that ended up attacking where those celestial dragons are, and then Fishman discrimination starts at the same time. Vegapunk is coming off like a very important character. And I know that we've heard about Dr. Vegapunk in the past and the fingerprints are all over the place. Like, that's not something that I'm shocked about. I'm just shocked at how deep the layers are going with the storytelling that Eiichiro Oda has been doing with One Piece, because this is one of those times where, for me as a reader, I keep going back and thinking, Oda put all these seeds here, and we were none the wiser of it. It never ceases to amaze me just how far ahead this man has been able to think with storytelling. Now, I will also say, though, I think that Vegapunk, in terms of his character, is just as much as wacky as what you would expect with some of these One Piece characters. However, at the same time, it's actually kind of genius how he talks about the way that he uses those clones. So he has the brain fruit, and basically the size of his brain and his head, everything is changing as he gets more information. So it makes sense that he would have 6 different clones. And the way that he breaks it down, he says, like, think of it like using the library. If everyone in the world had the ability to access my brain, then all of humanity would share my intelligence. And the way that he further explains it is that once a day, each of these clones of his, they synchronize their experience and the knowledge that they gain throughout the day, and everyone's experience and information that they get, because of how drastic their personalities are, it's going to be different, and it all just gets synced together. And so it gives you a little bit more understanding to how a genius like this works, because he's getting the same information, but he's getting it from different perspectives. And having a different perspective, I could tell you 2 plus 2 is 4, and I could say, like, 2 plus 2 is 4 because you take the number 2, and then you take the number 2, and then you get 4, or you take 2 times 2 and you get 4. However, the next person would say 2 plus 2 is 4 because you get 2 number 1s, and then you add that with another set of 2 number 1s. It's still giving you the number 4, but it's giving it to you from a different perspective. So I like what Oda is actually doing here, because it actually speaks to a deeper thing when it comes to how the brains of geniuses work, because they just see and they incorporate information at a different way than we do. So I thought that that was really cool that we saw that bit right there. Now, the next thing we see here is that as Vegapunk is going through and explaining all this information to Luffy and to Bonney, Chopper, and to Jinbe, Bonney just basically pulls out this sword and she's like, look, I had enough of this right here. I need you to turn my father back to normal. If you refuse, and she's got that sword at his neck like she's about to kill him. However, the sword that she's got is basically a dud, and it ends up basically shooting out all these different insects and everything, and it knocks her unconscious. Like, Luffy's like, hey, look at this. This is a beetle. And Chopper's like, dude, stop worrying about the beetle. This girl's unconscious right now. We need to be paying closer attention to her. And we see more signs that Vegapunk isn't just this mad scientist. Vegapunk also has a bit of a heart, because he says, like, hey, she's got a reason for wanting to kill me. However, he changes the subject and says, like, hey, I know you guys came from Wano, and I heard that there's a second dragon outside of Kaido. And Luffy's like, yeah, that was Momonosuke, and my dude, I don't know why you calling him a failure. However, he's got like a bunch of strength and he's super strong now. And the moment that Vegapunk asks, well, what color was he? And he says pink. Vegapunk just absolutely loses it because he calls it a failure. And Jinbe has a really good answer to this. He says, great, he's a genius with a perfectionist streak. And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Geniuses are wired just a little bit differently. Like, we look at Momo and we can't say objectively, like, hey, this is a failure because he's not a one-to-one ripoff of Kaido. And yet at the same time, he's actually a beautiful failure that is a success when you really just boil it down. And I like how we got more of the information of what it took to actually get to that point where how Vegapunk ended up making the failed devil fruits that ended up becoming the fruit that Momonosuke ended up eating. And we learn about how this creature that was down there in the dumps where they are, it might have been from 900 years ago. However, this creature attacked the Palace of the Celestial Dragons 200 years ago. And we get the flashback how this thing is just towering over, and we find out that like the world government ordered the scientists to have this thing destroyed. However, the scientists, in true scientist fashion, they're like, hey, I can't do that. Like, this is a great source of information. Why would I get rid of something like this? And as they're getting this information given to them by Vegapunk, we find out that the rest of the Straw Hats are watching the whole scene themselves. And as they're talking, we end up finding out that CP0 has now begun asking for permission to begin boarding onto Egghead. And they said, okay, we know for a fact that Bonney was here. We're going to go ahead and dispose of her. And one of the Vegapunk clones is like, hey, you know, CP0's here. Why not just go ahead and hand them over? You see Usopp freaking out because he's like, wait a second. Rob Lucci's part of that group right there. We just mixed it up with them all the way back in Annie's lobby. No way in hell I'm going through this again. And you get this moment where Sanji just turns into super simp. My guy's like, hey, Nico Robin, I'll take care of you. I'll protect you as many times as I need to from this guy. And you just see it with Robin. Robin looks spooked. And that's something I like right there because it kind of brings us back full circle because CP0 wanted to have, or rather CP9 wanted to have Nico Robin eliminated back in the whole thing with Annie's lobby. And we find out that the information that was on O'Hara is basically the information that was almost about to get her killed. We find out what happened. We find out that Vegapunk knows about this information. So this was a really nice way to continue building up CP0 because we did know like, hey, like these guys were behind the scenes at Wano. However, the fact that we're seeing them now getting ready to seemingly confront the Straw Hats, I thought this was a smart choice from a narrative perspective right here. If this is a in-between arc, like how Oda likes to kind of give us a short arc before we get to the grand scheme, bigger meat and potatoes arc, I thought this was really good to have CP0 brought in here. And you can see how more of the dots are beginning to start connecting because as this is going on and as you have Vegapunk #1 saying like, look, we're taking a stand against them. We're not going to let them come into the island. We will be fighting back against them. You have Kuma, who has been getting worked on by the revolutionaries, beginning to go haywire. And one of the things that you see is that they're looking at him and they're going like, he's not supposed to have a will of his own anymore. Why is he acting like this? And you see Dragon calling out to Kuma, and we have the line where we say that the revolution is really starting to begin. Oda has a few things at work right here where I'm gonna be very curious to see how Oda is able to piece everything together in a very effective way. But one thing that is clear is that we might have left Wano, but we just stepped into arguably the biggest arc that One Piece has. I think this is going to be a more important arc than what we got in Wano, or at the very least, a darker arc. And that's actually my chapter question, you guys. How do you guys feel about CP0 being positioned to start combating against the Straw Hats? But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.